Welcome to the business interview. I'm Marcus Carlson. 2015 started with celebrations for the eurozone as Lithuania became the 19th European country to adopt the single currency. But the festivities were overshadowed by crisis warnings because of political turmoil in Greece. A political party that wants to tear up Greece's bailout agreement leads the polls, and it's sparked speculation that the country could ultimately be forced to leave the eurozone area. Is the eurozone at risk of unravelling, and what could the consequences be? In this program, I'll put those questions to Jean-Claude Trichet, the former head of the European Central Bank. Mr. Trichet, it's a pleasure to have you here once again. Let's start with Greece. The Syriza party is in the polls, at least according to polls that we have seen recently, and they've promised to put an end to the austerity that was linked to their two bailout packages, or Greece's two bailout packages. How serious is the political turmoil as we're now looking at another Greek election on the 25th of January?
First of all, I would say Greece is a democracy. And in a democracy, you have elections, and the elections are, I would say, deciding who will lead the country. So we will see, first. Second, it is obvious that one party, which is, according to the survey, quite important and could be part of the government, not the government in itself, but part of the government, has, I would say, three elements, if I oversimplify, that are worth noting. Two are bad, and one is good, if I may. The two that are bad is that there is a general call for not paying the debt which has been accumulated vis-à-vis the taxpayers of the rest of Europe. The taxpayers of the rest of Europe were friends. They were friends helping Greece in very, very difficult circumstances. And it's not a very good idea to tell them, look, we won't repay you. So there is no doubt that there will be discussion, of course. But I think that the best message would be totally different. So thank you very much because you helped us, and we don't want to hurt you, but let's discuss together what we should do.
What about the second
element, which is also very important, is that there is a general orientation towards the massive increase of costs in the economy, wages and salaries, but cost in general. And that would, of course, do nothing but recreate a new additional unemployment on top of what exists already. So
You're talking about Syriza's pledge to walk away from austerity. They want to walk away from it.
Again, I never say austerity myself. I consider that what Greece has done is to go progressively back to a balanced economy domestically, a balanced budget. And that is very important. I don't call that austerity. When you are spending what you earn, it's not austerity, it's common sense.
What about the positive message that we're getting from Greece?
The start of Greece was minus 15% of the GDP of current account deficit, minus 15% of the GDP of budget deficit. That's the start. And of course, when you start from there, it is necessarily difficult to go back to balance. The third issue, which is a positive one, is that they do not want to leave the euro area. And the paradox is all the discussion is on whether or not they will leave the euro area when it is not at all, for very good reason, in their program. They do not want to leave the euro area because it would be a total catastrophe for Greece.
But Syriza still says that they want to renegotiate the bailout agreement. Could or should the rest of the eurozone agree to those demands and to look again at the bailout agreement?
But first of all, I already said that the message as is presently formulated was not correct vis-à-vis the friends that helped Greece, first. And second, I would say, as I already said, a discussion will take place necessarily at a certain moment. And we will see what comes out of this discussion, which should be responsible, if I may, from all sides.
But do you think that the eurozone should come up with a plan, so to speak, that could include Greece leaving the eurozone? After all, you need to prepare for all eventualities.
We have elections. We have people that will decide. Then we will have a new government. The new government will discuss its policy because it's very likely that there would be a coalition in the government. We will see. I think we should not anticipate, and I expect, as I said, responsibility from all partners.
Now, it's been widely reported that Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, believes that the rest of the Eurozone would remain intact largely if Greece were to leave the Eurozone. Is that right from your perspective? Is the risk of contagion, so to speak, not what it was, let's say, 2-3 years ago?
First of all, I think we have to be very, very careful when discussing leaks in Berlin. Mm-hmm. The porte-parole of Angela Merkel said that she never said that. And I'm sure of that because I read myself the leak in question, which clearly has a lot of remarks that cannot come from a highly positioned member of the German government. And there was in particular this idea that in any case the rest of the euro area would not be hurt if there are drama in Greece, where at the very moment where we could see that the stock exchanges all over Europe were on the contrary in a situation of great uneasiness.
So from your perspective, the contagion risk
I think you should not put too much attention to those leaks, in my opinion. I'm sure that the Chancellor does not think that. And I would say it is not reasonable to put yourself in a situation of an assumption which will not realize, in my opinion.
I want to turn to another hotly debated topic within the Eurozone at this stage, and that is the question whether or not the European Central Bank should engage in so-called quantitative easing, which means that the Eurozone, the European Central Bank will go into the markets and buy the bonds of Eurozone governments. That's something that we haven't seen so far. The ECB buying Eurozone bonds at a large scale. There will be a meeting within the ECB on the 22nd of January. What do you expect?
First of all, we saw that. We saw that when I was president. And as you know, we engage in purchasing treasuries for monetary policy reasons to be sure that the monetary policy transmission could be as correct as possible in all the euro area. But we purchased 5 treasuries in my time.
So, but not at the same level, let's say, the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England.
I mean, at a level which was certainly more than 200 billion euros, so was quite substantial, and particularly when applied to only a part of the euro area. But that being said, I would say the problem of the ECB is the following. Price stability means less than 2%, but close to 2%. And be credible in delivering less than 2, but close to 2 in the medium term, which means that you have to continue anchor inflation expectations solidly at that level. And now we are, for a long period of time, with a very, very low level of inflation. CPI, HICP inflation, as we say in our jargon, but it's a low level, and the risk of unanchoring inflation expectations is undoubtedly serious. So the ECB is absolutely right to reflect on what should be done, could be done, should be done, in order to contribute as much as possible to stabilize the medium-term inflation expectations. And that doesn't mean that the ECB alone can deliver that, because the responsibility of the government and of the parliament is also absolutely considerable. And I think that it is very important for all governments of the euro area to see that they have their own responsibility in this respect for more growth and more price stability in that sense. So the price stability closer to the 2%.
Let me ask you a question. Should the ECB do QE on the 22nd of January? Should there be a decision in that direction? Or do you think it would be wise to wait further, to wait longer?
I will not pronounce the expression QE myself, because what you have to know is that the ECB is already doing, one, policy insurance in terms of supplying liquidity to all banks. Second, policy insurance as regards the treasuries that could be in major difficulty. It is the OMT. So 2 policy insurances which are not given by the Fed, which are not given by any other central banks, and are part of the weaponry of the ECB. So that is extremely important, and it is neglected by observers and markets. Second, on top of these two policy insurances, the ECB is purchasing, at the moment we are speaking, ABSs, is purchasing covered bonds and is active in this domain. So what could be done would be, in my understanding, more purchases of tradable securities, public and private and public, if we want, an additional element of the weaponry to be activated.
Do you think that officials are willing to come out with a big sledgehammer, so to speak, and to come out with something brash? Or do you think that the psychology is to be cautious?
No, I think in the ECB, as is the case in all major central banks, the problem is how do you handle your own action, your own new possible weaponry, taking into account that you have only part of the problem yourself, because the structural reforms of the governments, because the appropriate macro policies that are pursued by governments and by executive branches is part or a major part of the problem. So how do you, I would say, balance, on the one hand, what you have to do, because you are the central bank, and on the other hand, the messages that you should send to governments for them not to ignore their own responsibility and rely upon the central bank. The central bank cannot substitute to government and should not substitute to government. So this is the permanent, if I may, debate inside central bank. And from that standpoint, the ECB is not different from the others, it seems to me.
You make monetary policy sound like a game of chess in some respects.
No. But a game, not a game, certainly not, but a responsibility which has to be exerted as responsibly as possible, as the treaty is calling for.
All right, Jean-Claude Trichet, it has been a pleasure, as always, to speak to you. With that, we're going to be wrapping up this edition of the Business Interview. Thank you very much indeed for watching France 24, and don't forget that you can get more business news on our website, france24.com.